This is the Peter Greenwood Show at the Edinburgh Fringe, and I have got a guest to my right. For those not watching, and why wouldn't you be watching? Could you tell me your name and your show title, please?
My name is Rob White, and the show title is The Ghost of White Hart Lane.
Let's talk about the show. Where did it come from? What's its origin?
The origin is sort of me, I guess, because it's a biographical tale of my father, who was a professional footballer and one of Scotland's finest footballers, who ended up playing for Tottenham, who tragically died when he was 27, and I was 6 months old at the time. So about 2011, I co-authored a biography of my dad, and his name when he was a footballer was The Ghost of White Hart Lane. That was his nickname, which, as a football fanatic, that is still one of the coolest nicknames out there.
It is very cool.
It's
a great name.
But as a young kid, it was very confusing, because ghosts are meant to embody scary things and things that we can not really understand. And actually, a lot of my story was based around, is based around the fact that I didn't know this very famous person, and in later life, I've sort of searched for him, really, and that's what part of the play deals with. It also deals with the very common theme, which is how families don't necessarily talk about things in depth, and there's certain areas as a kid you know not to go to, not to touch, but you don't understand them. So what you do is you create your own narrative, and that narrative can be good or bad. So the play deals with essentially it's a story of my dad's life, but then it's also about my search for my father.
And I imagine that narrative kind of becomes locked in at some point, because you're growing up with it, and that's all you know. So when you hear something else, it must shock that narrative. Yes,
it's confusing, and because my dad was a very public figure, when he died July 21st, 1964, it was national news, it was on the radio, it was front page news. And in fact, one of the inspirations for the play was the number of people I met, who Spurs fans and also Scotland fans, who remembered exactly where they were when they heard the news about my dad. So it's their JFK moment. But it was also the moment where a lot of people said it was the first time they'd either seen their dad cry or they'd seen their uncle cry, because it meant so much to them. And actually, that's one of the sort of messages, but that's one of the brilliant things about sport, is that it can create it can engender emotions in people. Yeah.
I'd like to ask a little bit about the public perception of your dad, because growing up, people must have told you many, many stories about him.
Yeah, indeed, and that was one of the frustrations, I think, growing up, was that I felt a lot of people knew more about him than I did.
Yeah.
A sort of brief resume of it was that my mum didn't really talk very much about my dad. There were no pictures of him anywhere in the house. She was 22 with 2 kids under 2 when my dad died, when she was widowed, and I think she was just really she was in shock. And other people had this sort of press perception of him as effectively a god. He was. That's what that's what people still think of footballers as, these sort of larger than life figures. And I used to get very frustrated, especially when I was a teenager and it's into my 20s as well, really frustrated that people I met knew more about my dad than I did. And actually I write about it in the book, but also talk about it in the play. A lot of the things I wanted to know were the simple things, like what did he smell like, what did he sound like, and actually, so I used to tell people that actually I didn't know my dad. But then I've come to realization, I was 6 months old when he died, and anybody that studied child development, those first 6 months are really crucial.
Yeah.
And actually, I can make myself very sad thinking about what it would have been like for me at 6 months, wondering where this person had gone, where this presence had gone, this voice, this energy had gone, and not understanding it, really.
And it's... I don't mean this in a bad way, but it must be very unfair to look back that you did lose him so young, and that you didn't know him, but other people do. And you said you got frustrated about that.
Absolutely, I don't take it in a bad way. I did. There was a point in my life where I got really angry with that fact, and then I think actually, even as in my mid-40s, when we were working on the biography and the biography came out, it was almost like this cathartic process where I realised that actually I did know a lot about my dad, and actually I also started to realise that it was really important for other people. He was a really important figure. So for instance, somebody who had made their dad cry, or somebody that had, somebody that Scotland fans could be proud of, or Tottenham fans, or Alloa fans, or Falkirk fans. All of those clubs still have a great affinity for this person. And when I'm up here at the moment, I'm endlessly bumping into people that either saw my dad or have heard tales about him. And that for me now becomes a celebration rather than something I became really angry about.
That's exactly what I was going to ask next. It must feel like a celebration when people talk to you about him, and there is all the footage and photos and news stories about him. That must be kind of precious.
It is. It's beautiful, actually. It's a really lovely thing now, and I'm still constantly astounded. Bearing in mind his nickname was The Ghost, obviously, which is where the interview started. The number of times even now somebody will send me. I saw a picture on Saturday here that. A lady came along who used to live 3 doors along from my Granny White up in Musselburgh, and she was in her mid-80s. But she had a signed photo that my dad had given her in 1960. I'd never seen that before. So there's always this new stuff. It is almost like I'm carrying the ghost motif through, but it is almost like every now and again something new quite often will crop up. And actually, I remember hearing Eddie Izzard talking about because Eddie Izzard, I think their mum died when they were 12, and saying that there's very few pictures of her around. And actually, one of the great things is that there's so much, like you've said, footage, pictures, all this stuff, and I'm really proud that all that stuff is out there. And that's part of the rationale for the play, is keeping that. I think we have a duty to keep stories going, really, and that's part of what that is. Really, it is a bit like a folk story.
Yeah, it gets passed down from generation to generation, and every generation takes from it what they need, which is different for everybody.
Precisely that, absolutely.
I'd like to ask about the play. How did you decide to do it in this medium as opposed to a documentary or a TV drama or something? The end of last year, I realised that 2024 would be the 60th anniversary of my dad's death. It would also mean I was turning 60, which in order to sort of commemorate both of those, I was trying to think what to do, and actually a play, it was sort of a little bit obvious to me, and also the fact that it was going to be it's a one-man show, and the one man has a dialogue essentially a dialogue between me growing up, reaching important milestones in my life and not having a father, and obviously my dad, it's him telling his story, because I've always sort of, at different times in my life, I've always had this dialogue with my dad, although I've not known him. So and also it was, as a kid, I've always the festival's always been a part of my life, and actually because my dad was from Musselburgh, it does feel a little bit like bringing him home, actually, and it's a nice feeling. When you were putting the play together, how did you decide what to include and what direction to take it in? Because there's many directions you could have gone in. What nailed it down to this current iteration? Well,
Martin Murphy, the writer and director, has to take a lot of credit for it, but actually Martin and I are friends, and when I first came up with the idea, I sort of went, it was a bit like, I've come up with this idea, you may think this is a bit crazy, but I want to do a play. And Martin was like, yeah, absolutely, could understand it. And then I said to him, but I think it needs to be a one-man play. And then I could see a look in his eyes that was a mixture of terror and excitement, actually. I think I wanted to challenge him as a writer and as a director, and I also thought it would be a really lovely challenge, and a massive challenge for an actor. So we sort of, Martin wrote an initial draft, and then one thing that I felt was that from the book, part of the feedback, which was 2011 or 2012, was that people really liked my story. The it wasn't just a straight football biography. So actually, I got Martin to try and build on. So between the two of us, and Martin did a lot of the work on, building my story into sort of entwining that through the play. And the result is sort of almost exactly how I pictured it. Yeah.
And When it came to casting the play, did you have much of a decision in that?
I didn't, because my background, I'm a photographer, so I'm a creative, and I do realise I with something like a project, all the projects I've ever done in my life, one of the worst things is for an art director to sit on your shoulder saying, actually, you should be doing it like this and you should be doing it like this. So actually I made it really clear at the start that I would help Martin in whatever he needed with the play, but actually I had trusted him implicitly with the artistic direction of casting, that whole process. And yeah, again, to be fair, it's been a steep learning curve for me, actually learning a lot more about the wonderful world of theatre. So I just put all my trust into Martin, basically. Yeah.
And what has the reaction been like from the audience who've been to see it? Because as you said, your dad is from Musselburgh, which is 4 or 5, it's a couple of miles from Edinburgh. What has the reaction been like?
It's been astounding. We had an initial, so the premiere of it was at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on July 21st, which was 60 years to the day since my dad died. And the reaction there was amazing. And the reaction here has continued. It's even people that didn't know the story they're quite blown away by what the journey they go on and the emotional journey. And actually, yeah, I know friends and family that have been very moved by it, and have blamed me for making them cry.
That is something I was going to ask. Have your family seen it, and what was their reaction?
Yeah, we had a big day on Saturday where a lot of my family from Trinent came over. There's 2 of my cousins are going to today, and the reaction has been really positive. I was through the whole process. I've been sort of anxious because you're never sure how people are going to react. I mean, essentially, I sit there in parts feeling quite uncomfortable. But again, I've left Martin. I think I have to stress to people that it is an adaptation, and one of the beautiful things about a good adaptation is that it should change. There's no point in just telling the same story from the same vantage point. So when my family have watched it, I have got an uncomfortable feeling sometimes of thinking, will they get it? Will they understand it? Will they be upset? I like people to be moved, but will they be pissed off?
Yeah.
But actually, no, they haven't been. They've really understood it. And for my close family, there is an overwhelming sense of pride in that story. And it's a beautiful thing. It's been beautiful to see everybody's reaction, actually. It's lovely.
Which must, as you said, it must be lovely, and it's also must help them in some way with the loss of your dad. Yeah, it is. It helps them with the loss of my dad, but also you've just reminded me that I've had various people that have said that they've almost the same thing, actually. Towards the end of the play, they sit there and they think about their relationship with their dad, or, mostly it's with their dad, but it is other relationships within their family, and bits of it really resonate. It's quite a human story. So actually, and it has the same with the book, actually. There's stuff where people really get moved in some way, which was actually I was asked in interviews before the play came out, what did I want the audience to come away with? And actually, my answer was, if it can move people in some way and they get some sense of a feeling of some sort of emotion, then that's job done. Yeah. I mean, there is the 2 elements, like as you said, your dad was a hero in the sport, but it's also a very human story of losing someone, of losing an anchor in your life. And it is, and the play, I talk about this, a void that's always there, and no matter what you do. And actually, when I talk to other people who have lost, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be young to have lost a relative, a father or a mother or a brother or whatever. There is always this. It's a really difficult thing to describe. It's almost a feeling of separation or a hole. Yeah. In the play, actually, Martin talks. So one of the things the actor Cal, when he's playing me, talks about this grief that's there, always there, and sometimes it's like a carrier bag, it's manageable. Sometimes it's like a fridge freezer that's on your back. And there's less times now in my life, but there were definitely times in my life where it really affected me, and I didn't really have anyone to talk to. And I think that's how times have changed now. We do talk about, thankfully, we talk about mental health, and we talk about
the fact that we may not be feeling great about something, and it doesn't mark us out as being weird or strange. It's really acceptable, which is fantastic.
Yeah, there is more support nowadays.
Absolutely, yeah.
What is next for the show after the Fringe? Do you know where you're taking it next?
We don't. We're hoping that it's going to go back to London. As I said earlier in this interview, this whole theatre business thing has been a real learning curve for me, and it makes a lot of sense that if we can get it to go back to London, because that's where Martin and I are based, then that's the ultimate goal. For me, from a selfish point of view, it's job done already because the story's out there. Egotistical. It may sound very egotistical, but an idea that I had is now part of the Edinburgh Festival and has premiered at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. And people that I have wanted to see it have seen it. But it would be lovely if more people saw it.
I don't think that's egotistical. I think that's a fantastic accomplishment.
Thank you. Yeah,
Being at the Fringe is people dream of being it, and you're here. You made it.
Yeah, and we've sold out a show today again. So
congratulations. Where can people find out more about you and the show online?
Good question. The show online. The show runs until the 26th of August, and it's at the Underbelly, Bristow Square, and I can be found on Twitter. It's at Rob A White, or Instagram. And my Instagram is nothing to do with football. So it's Rob A White.
Rob, thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure.
The Ghost of White Hart Lane is playing at Underbelly Bistro Square at 1:25 until the 26th of August. You can find tickets at edfringe.com. This episode was produced by @VCToriaA on Twitter, go say hello to her, and by myself, Peter Greenwood, who also hosted it. Until next time for the Peter Greenwood Show at the Edinburgh Fringe, bye everybody, bye.